Wow, Jacinda Barrett has been underused. Just wow. And this show needs to use her a lot more after this episode. Hey guys, Cameron for Bloodline, Season 2, Episode 7, Part 20, and holy shit, one episode. I mean, I know Episode 6 was huge, and I said that was the best episode. No, this by far is the best episode of this season, and I think probably the first episode that was as good as a Season 1 episode. I mean, these three, Part 4, Episode 4, Episode 6, and Episode 7, these have been as good as a Season 1 episode, and this by far was the best of those three. And like I said, really, as good as this episode was, it really belonged to Jacinda Barrett, who I think has been critically underused, really. I mean, this is a character that really could just come across as, just one of the Rayburn, just John's wife or something like that. And this episode shows she has a much bigger range than we have. I really feel she's been hiding it in, just hiding it all season. And finally, it came out in this episode, and I absolutely loved it. And honestly, I feel it's honestly Emmy-worthy because the work that she does here is just incredible. But let's just get into this episode because I absolutely loved it. Amazing stuff in this episode. Some huge scenes here. We have 3 episodes left of the finale. I'm definitely going to be finishing this season this week, definitely. But let's just get into this episode. So we start off pretty much right where we left off last week. As we know, John was horribly, Ozzy was horribly beaten down by John. John has these, marks on him, and basically, there's this whole conversation. We open up with Johnny's washing the blood off his hands, and Diana walks in, but at this point, she doesn't even try. She doesn't even really want to talk to him. We already know that Diana is really just not having it. She's not having it. She knows that John is hiding something from her, and she's really pissed, obviously, because whatever he's hiding is really affecting the family. Like I said, the Rayburn family slowly breaking apart, and the next day, Diana, John, and Janie all sit down for basically a much-needed conversation, because obviously, a lot went down the previous night, and they want to talk about what happened with Sally. Janie complains that she was only telling the truth, but it's obviously that's not the best thing to do. She was only telling the truth, and yeah, she wanted to admit that Sally wanted Eve to have an abortion and everything, but again, I mean, Eve kind of fucked things up for everyone. I do think, like I said, that was the point. She wanted to fuck things up for everyone. She clearly did do that, but it's now thrown a wrench into this family completely, and it's slowly destroying I think the family too, definitely. The family slowly, especially John's side, his wife and his daughter, it's really breaking things apart. And basically, Diane and John, they have a very interesting morning conversation. They just, again, it's very much like what Meg and Kevin want to do, where they want to tell the truth, and John's trying to keep them from not telling the truth, and Janie as well, they can't tell the truth. Janie just wants to tell the truth. Janie and Diana, you really see in this episode, are the innocent ones, and while this show truly doesn't have any truly good people because they're all human characters, Janie and Diana, I think, remain two of the most innocent characters on the show. They're two characters that have tons of information, and they know a lot of what's going on, but they can't really do anything about it, and I think this episode very well did that. I really enjoyed that, and that perfectly leads us into how great this episode really is, and how revealing it is, and really just how big of an episode it really is for Diana. So Eve then wakes up to Ozzy, recovering from his altercation with John, and Eve warns Ozzy not to mess up her plan to infiltrate the Rayburn clan, and Ozzy's just having fun in his own twisted way, and he doesn't even tell, Eve that anything, that John was the one that did this to him or anything, and basically, she tells Ozzy that the only reason he's staying is because he's having fun, and that's really it, and Ozzy grabs Eve by the hair, asks why she would want them to be her family, and she looks kind of like, she's kind of scared, definitely, and it's really interesting the way that's going, but Ozzy tells her she has nothing to worry about, and again, John Leguizamo just continues to kill it in this show. And that's the biggest thing about Jacinda Barrett being the real MVP of this episode, because John Leguizamo is killing it just as much as her. It's just Jacinda Barrett, she was the star of this episode because she hasn't had that big episode yet. John Leguizamo has, and she really hasn't. In fact, I haven't heard the name Jacinda Barrett, and she absolutely killed it in this episode. He was great too, but she definitely was really great. I think really she did a great job. But meanwhile, Marco is really starting to do this investigation on his own, even though John told him, to stop doing this and stop, trying to dig for answers. He's going to continue digging, and you definitely get that sense that he's doing that, especially now that we know what happened, with Ozzy and everything, the connection that Marco has, with Ozzy, I think is really interesting. We definitely see, with, not Ozzy, with, Aguirre, the connection he has with Aguirre. Now we know that Marco really is slowly turning against his family and really does not really want anything to do with the Rayburns, kind of just doing his own thing. But Eric basically is trying to live his truth, and Marco swings by to ask more questions about the hotel room, and Marco tells him it's only a matter of time before he pins a body on him, and it finally comes to a head. He tells Marco to go talk to the people with the answers. Danny's family, of course, that's who he needs to talk to. The Rayburns, that's who he needs to talk to. Don't get him into it. Danny was attacked at the Red Reef, and he's sick of people always being accused, and that he should go to the people who have answers, because he knows that even though he doesn't know the amount of stuff they've done, he knows that definitely the Rayburns are the one that have all the answers, and they are the ones that he should go to. So basically he tells them, look, you gotta go to them, I'm not the one with the answers, and I think it was actually well done that he did that. Eric can be a bit of a douchebag at points, but really here, he really just wants, Marco to leave him alone. He wants to be able to enjoy himself. He wants to be able to move on from this, and he really can't if Marco's going to continue interrogating him constantly. He's not the one he needs to go after. He needs to go after the rest of the family. That's what he needs to do, and that's exactly what Marco decides to do in this episode. We see Meg is keeping busy as usual. She's reading up on Marco, noticing in his file that he was hired 1 month after the Aguirre incident, and again, as we know, she's trying to do whatever she can to get John to win, and she calls John, tells him he is only 7 points behind Aguirre, and she almost tells him the truth about Marco, pretty much spilling that she's been doing all this work for him, which, again, he's never really wanted. And she tells John he has to speak at a victims' rights group, and John is hesitant, but he ultimately listens to her, because it might just be, if it's gonna, I think with John, if it's gonna help his campaign, he's gonna do it. And again, he wants to do the campaign, that way he can do this all on his own. He doesn't really want any of his family involved. In this episode, we continue to show that, and I definitely really did like seeing that. So then we get this really great scene between Diana and Sally, where we really do see how similar they really are. And even Janie knows answers at least. Diana and Sally pretty much know nothing. They know some things, but they don't really know what's going on. Diana suspects that something's going on with John, while Sally kind of is the one that just wants to believe that her family's great and that nothing really is wrong with them. And basically they run to each other at the inn, and as expected, Sally feels awful for what she did to Janie. She never expected it to go that far. Diana's still being defensive. She won't force Janie to make peace. Diana wants to know what Janie said to Sally, and Sally tells her that Janie blames her for Danny's death, and Sally claims the entire family had a hand in it. She knows by far that it was the entire family that had something to do with this. She doesn't know the extent, but she knows that definitely something happened, and this really gets Diana to think, and that's a really good thing they do in this episode, is every piece of information that Diana gets, it's just adding to more of what she's heard. The more, answers she hears, the more she starts to put things together, and that very much goes with the rest of this episode. We then see Kevin decides to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. He is in fact going to Alcoholics Anonymous. He sees his new friend there, and Kevin shares his problem for the first time with the group, and I actually like that Kevin is trying to move on from his alcohol problems, and we see that Kevin is struggling with the truth and deception, and Kevin staying sober is all about honesty, which is extremely difficult when they constantly have to be lying, obviously, but a really great scene. I really like the way that was done. He talks about how, his downfall was unexpected and everything, and he has lunch with the sheriff to discuss the Red Reefs in murder, and there's basically, the sheriff makes an accurate claim that the family worked together to cover up a murder, basically, and that's exactly what was going on. Basically, that's what was going on. I like the way the scene went with Kevin and Aguirre, though I definitely thought, not Aguirre, Kevin and Doug, I thought that was definitely a really good scene. But then we see that, we then see Marco, he goes to Aguirre, they're having lunch, and Aguirre wants to examine more about the family. He wants to know more what's going on. Now that he has all this allegations about him, he wants to get involved with the Rayburns, basically see what he can find, and he wants Marco to question Kevin and Meg again. Marco seems torn with his loyalty, but you can tell I think he pretty much is going to side with Aguirre, because he's worked with Aguirre before. Working with the Rayburns isn't doing him any favors. John wants him to not at all be involved in what's going on, so I think the best thing for Marco to do, honestly, is to side with Aguirre, because it really will just do him the best, and Marco gives John a heads up that Aguirre's not letting the Danny case go, and John use a heads up to let Kevin and Meg know what is coming, because obviously this is going to end up really bad for them if they're not letting this case go, because if they don't let this case go and they can't find another suspect or another possible person to convict, then it's not going to end well for them. And Kevin admits that he was high last time he talked to Marco. He suggests that maybe they could use this because he's not high now. Maybe he should talk to him again. Maybe that's what they should do. So I thought that was definitely very interesting. The way that went down definitely, again, does show that it's getting harder and harder for them to cover this up. And even though they're trying to cover this up, it's just getting harder and harder. And it's very slowly not going to be as easy to, basically, it's not going to be as easy for them to cover up what's going on. So Nolan and Sally then have this really interesting conversation at the inn. Nolan tells her that Danny hated being a Rayburn, and honestly, I think these two really did need to have a conversation, especially after the night that they had with Janie. They need to have a conversation, and Nolan basically tells her that Danny hated being a Rayburn. He really didn't want to be in the family at all, and Sally's guilt level's through the roof. Nolan seems very surprised when Sally asks Nolan to take her to Danny's old restaurant. That might be the thing that they need, because, again, we know that probably the happiest moments between Danny and Nolan was at that restaurant, so you don't really know where Sally's going. I'm like, what's really happening here? What is she really going to find out? Because again, we know Sally wants answers. We know that she hasn't gotten any answers, and I think she definitely does want them, and you don't really know where she's headed with this. Why exactly does she want to go to his restaurant? What is that really going to take, where's that really going to take her? I don't really know. So Megan talks to Kevin about Alcoholics Anonymous, and he tells her that it's going really well, but it's nearly impossible because recovery is all about honesty, and it's not the Rayburn strong suit, obviously. Really, we know that they can't be honest, and basically we see Diana finds her snooping through John's stuff looking for her seahorse, sees Janie snooping through John's stuff looking for her seahorse necklace, but it's in the moment that Diana's expressing why Danny wasn't a good person that she finally figures out, pretty much in this scene that I absolutely love, the way that she talks about how Danny wasn't a good person. She basically realizes that John was the one that killed Danny. She knows very well, and that's something I love, is that fairly early in this episode, Diana discovers, holy shit, my husband's the one that killed Danny, and I think she kind of knew that something was going on there, but never to this extent. But I think she kind of knows, obviously, because it all seemed to come together. And basically Janie Sasser, but that's clearly, obviously she doesn't think that could be possible, but I think Diana pretty much knows what's going on. Diana tells her, why they went away and that they were afraid of Danny, and she keeps thinking back to her and John's conversation. She starts thinking about what it has said, and she remembers leaving, the panic, and how John didn't know what he was going to do, and you're really wondering, is she actually possibly figuring out what's going on here? You're not really sure, and that's something that I actually really enjoy, is that you don't really know if she's actually figuring it out. So then we go to the interrogation. Marco talks to Kevin first. He asks Kevin questions, tries to rattle him, and Kevin struggles a little bit, but does a nice recovery, and I like the way this scene was done. He claims the day after he saw Danny has needed more cocaine and called his dealer, and it turns the boat from Danny's crash belonged to Kevin's dealer, Raffi, who used to work for Lowry, which is very interesting that he used to work for Lowry. And we see Meg then goes to Meg to interrogate, and obviously, the past history between them, it shouldn't be as hard, but it's clear that he's not using that. Marco actually seems suspicious of how strange Meg was acting and why she wanted to leave so quickly. And definitely, you can tell these two are probably going to have a big fight or whatever's going on there, so that was definitely very interesting. I really enjoyed that, and again, I like that Marco really isn't, trying to favor any of the Rayburns. He's not using that as like, this person's a Rayburn, so there's no way anything bad could happen there. If anything, he's starting to get more and more suspicious, and you can kind of tell that he knows, I think, what's going on. He knows that definitely the Rayburns are involved. He just doesn't know more, what extent, and I do like the way that Kevin pretty much summed this whole thing up, though, that he was, he needed more cocaine and what was going on, this problem, and he couldn't control it. You can really tell that he is trying to turn things around. He is trying to get things better. And basically, back to Marco and Meg, he starts calling out her behavior as strange, claiming it was kind of, suspicious that she put her luggage in a car to move to New York when she took a cab to the airport the next day, which is totally correct, because that is exactly what she did. That is exactly why Meg left, to get away from all the drama. And he runs to the lead, makes the assumption that Meg didn't want him anywhere near her and that Meg was panicking. Now, yes, Meg did get the position, the job position, but I don't think she wouldn't have taken it had the tension and, what happened with Danny not have happened. That's the only reason she left, and because they told her to, basically. Tensions continue to build. Ultimately, Meg says she doesn't have to be there, excuse herself, and she heads over to see John and talks to him before his domestic violence speaking engagement, and John pulls off. Meg heads up to the campaign headquarters, leaving Ozzy in the parking lot watching from afar, still reeling from a revelation. We see this incredible scene with Diana, and this really was the scene with Jacinda Bear. Them just like, she is owning this episode. This scene was incredible. Diana's out for a jog, basically, and, she's running and everything, and this is when she starts to put things together. She's thinking about a lot of things on this walk. She thinks about, she knows something has been way off with John, and she's scared of how he has been so distant, how he's acting, and she tells John about, and basically, she thinks about that. She thinks about the conversation that John and Meg have been having. She thinks about what she said to Sally, just everything she's thinking about, and she realizes that there's no way that it couldn't be anyone else than John. It just seems to make sense. But basically, she doesn't really want to be true, so she does something very smart that I really thought was kind of cool, and really, I thought was just really one of the best parts of this episode. I think probably for me, the highlight of this episode, the reason why Diana is, like I said, the key player of this episode, is not just because of the fact that she finds out on her own that John killed Danny, is that she tries to do whatever she can to make it seem like that's not true, because she goes to John, and basically, she asks about Janie looking for the necklace, and she says, where'd you put it and everything, and John just says, he gives her very vague answers, like, it's gone, or whatever, and it's not enough for her. These answers that he's giving her, it's not at all enough. She needs more than that, and, he talks about how, it's gone and everything, and she admits that he's scared for the first time in their marriage and everything, and how it doesn't take long for John to blow up the necklace, and it causes Diane to ask him what's going on, because honestly, she's kind of scared. She knows that he's hiding something, and she talks about his hands covered in bruises, and she recommends a therapist, and John quickly rebuffs. Diane tells him that she quits. She literally says she quits, and she walks out, and she's really upset, obviously, what's going on. It's a really nice scene. A really crazy scene the way it's going on, but it really did seem inevitable. I knew eventually Diana was going to find out on her own. Just the way that she's been so in John's face, and the way that she's been so suspicious of what's going on, you knew at some point she was going to find out, and finally in this episode, it seems she has found out, but she just doesn't want it to be true. But basically, John not giving her any answers is just increasing her suspicions, and just increasing her thinking that John must have been the one that did it, because why else wouldn't he have done it? I mean, why else wouldn't he have given her answers? If he wouldn't have done this, he would have given her answers, and he's not giving her any answers. He's being very vague, and that just makes him look more shady, and obviously, that's enough for her to just, say goodbye to him for right now. So, really interesting the way that was done. I really enjoyed that. So Meg goes over to Marco, basically, because things are not good between her and Marco, and also because she wants to keep Marco from doing anything stupid, and basically she tells Marco that she'll open up about her family, because obviously before she wasn't saying anything, but she decides to give him some important background info for him, how Sally left, how Danny took Sarah on that boat, and she drowned, and that's when Robert beat him, and basically gives him all this information, most of which I don't really think he needed, but she does tell him when Sally got back, she had her other 3 kids lie to the cops to protect Robert, as we know, and she says that's why she ended with Marco, because she wanted to escape her family, and she couldn't do that and still be with him, and it's hard to tell how much of it meant to mislead Marco, and how much of it is true. That's what I thought was interesting, is that some of it I kind of think is true. Then maybe some of it was to get him away from this crazy family, because their family is very corrupted, does have a very bad reputation, and there is a lot going on there, and she didn't want him involved. But we also know that what happened with Danny, and how she's trying to cover that up from him. So you don't really know how much of this is her being sincere and saying, look, I really didn't want you involved in my family and everything, and how much of this is her just trying to make her seem innocent and make her family seem innocent. You don't really know, but she says that Marco needs to decide who he's loyal to, and really, I don't think she's wrong, because Marco seems like he's playing both sides, and he really needs to choose one side, because he's playing both the Rayburns and the Aguirres, and he needs to realize, am I on the Rayburn side or am I on the Aguirre side? And yes, he is trying to find information for this case and try to get all the information possible, but he doesn't really know what's going on, and you can tell that he, definitely wants answers. He's very hungry for answers. He's going to do everything he can to get them, and basically, Mark apologizes, tells him that she has to choose a side, and they end up having sex in this scene. They actually get very close, they end up having sex, and you're really wondering, is Marco actually back? Was she able to coax him into it? We'll get to that in a second. Then we get this really great scene with John, where he's giving this very good speech at the victims' rights groups. He talks about violence and how it is inside everyone, and It's a great scene because really what he's talking about is not, he's talking about what's inside of him. He's talking about the beast that's come out of him. Like I've said it all season, John has had that beast inside of him and it's come out, and it's not going to go away now. Now it's out. The violence corrupted him, and everything that he's saying here is all about him. And he talks about, he basically says everything that the violence lies within all of us. And Diana's face, again, this is just Diana's way of knowing that John is, the one that killed Danny. Just him saying this again, it just adds up. It really just all adds up very well. And John can clearly find a suspect, definitely. And also John can find Diana after what happened after the panel. So we know that definitely something is going on there. But then we see Marco and Meg after they've had sex. Basically, they talk about that night in her driveway where she says that Alec was at her house and that's why she panicked. And again, it's definitely a lie, but it's also a very good lie. And that is definitely true. And that's definitely not true, obviously, because Alec is the man that cheated on him, she cheated on him. We know that she left Marco for Alec. Now, what the hell happened to Alec? I don't know. Alec just kind of left her life or whatever. I don't really know. But basically, she's now trying again to make herself seem innocent and basically try to cover up her family name, which I honestly think that Meg is doing a good job with. But again, Marco can tell that definitely something is going on. John's then leaving the group, notices Diana isn't there. He wakes up the next morning and he finds just the kids. It's just Janie and Ben there, and Diana's not there. And basically Ben says that she left because of an emergency, and John knows that it's definitely not just an emergency. There's definitely more going on. She didn't just randomly leave for their aunt's house. There's a reason why she left, and he's obviously very upset about why she left and everything. So Eric then meets up with Ozzy to bring him his gun. He asks why Ozzy needs it, and Ozzy simply says he wants it because it's his. And obviously that can't be a good thing, because obviously there's a reason why he wants this gun. And Ozzy then stops by the Rayburn campaign office, and he tells Meg that John is the one that beat him up. Right then and there he says that, tries to intimidate Meg. He knows John didn't want Danny around, wants to tell Meg about the Red Reef Inn. And basically, again, to Ozzy, Meg doesn't know, that John was the one that killed Danny. He pretty much thinks that John was the one that killed Danny. He pretty much knows that John's the one that did it. But again, Meg already knows. And again, the way that Meg is playing it cool, making it seem like she doesn't know, it just really shows how great of an actress Linda Cardellini really is. And I think they showed that very well here. But again, Jacinda Barrett really was the pro of this episode. And especially in this last scene. I love the way this last scene was done, because John does in fact find Diana at the end of the scene. And she's terrified of John. And if anything, she's staying away from John. And I love the way that she has like such a, so away from John in the scene. Even though he's right near her, she's so away from him. She's so much away from him because she just can't look him in the eye, and thought that there was no way he could ever kill Danny. She won't even ask the question because she couldn't even fathom the answer. She's not going to ask him. She says, I know it's you, but I'm not ever going to ask you because I don't want to know the answer. And John stands there speechless, which essentially answers her question. And Diana questions their safety. John's barely able to say yes, and she says what he's done could have destroyed them. And John basically says that, he says, she asks if anything bad's happened. He says it hasn't, and she basically says that if anything happens to let her know. And he walks away, can't believe that she's found on her own. Basically, their marriage is not ever going to be the same again. That is the way this episode ends. Really crazy stuff, but such an amazing episode. And really, like I said, just a really great change of pace. I love that this episode focused on Diana. I love this episode. She now knows what's going on. I pretty much knew she was going to find out on her own. And the way that Marco is also slowly finding out, I really am enjoying. But Diana especially, how is this going to change their marriage? Because now that she pretty much knows that he is the one that is guilty and knows that there really is no other suspect, she obviously really is pissed. And she obviously doesn't know what to do. And especially in that last scene, you can really tell she doesn't want the answer to be that her own husband did it, but there really is no other answer, and that's the one that she needs to believe. And really, she has every reason to believe that he is the one that did it, and there really is no other possible suspect. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's going on there. If she's gonna be able to, if they're gonna be able to repair this marriage, and if things are gonna be good for the Ravens, because like you can tell, Meg and John are definitely trying to cover up what's going on. Kevin as well, but definitely Meg and John are doing extensive work to try to cover things up. Marco, I think, definitely can tell. Marco can definitely tell that something is going on, but really, I don't think Meg is wrong where he's saying you need to choose a side, because he's on the Rayburns, but he's also with the Aguirres, and he really needs to choose where he stands, because he can't just keep playing both sides. He needs to pick a side, and he's not picking a side, and that's obviously really pissing them off because he's not picking a side. as far as this whole thing goes with Ozzy definitely knows that John's the one that did it. And that's something I'm really looking forward to, is seeing how that conversation goes down with Ozzy and John, because I'm glad that Ozzy's not dead. I thought that John killed Ozzy. He didn't kill Ozzy. First of all, it's very hard to beat a man to death with just your bare hand. Definitely had to be really angry to do it. But I thought that John was so angry that he did do it, but he wasn't that angry that he didn't kill Ozzy. Ozzy's still very much alive, and there's going to be a confrontation between those two, and I can't wait to see how that goes down. And then Kevin really is trying to help himself. He really is trying to get himself this help, but I am worried that Kevin's going to down spiral. I just don't know if Kevin's going to be able to completely turn things around. I don't know if that's possible. We'll have to see what happens with that, because I honestly don't know if John's going to be able to completely turn things around. I honestly don't know. That we'll have to see what happens with there. And, Janie as well, again, she has the answers that Sally seeks. I think Sally's gonna be very close to figuring out what's going on. And why is she going with Nolan to Danny's old, restaurant? Why are they going there? What is this gonna lead her to? What does she really think she's getting out of this? I'm not really sure. That's gonna be really interesting. And then John running for mayor. What is Aguirre gonna find from the Rayburns and everything? How is this gonna help his campaign? We'll have to see. But overall, guys, let me know what you guys thought of this episode. Absolutely love this episode. By far best episode of the season. I mean, it's gonna be very hard to top this episode, definitely. And I will see you guys next video. We have 3 episodes left this season. I don't know if I'll get to episode 8 tonight. I'll probably start tonight, but I won't finish it tonight. But let me know what you guys saw this episode, and we'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for tonight's episode of Guilt, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.